So I'm sleeping, and I'm having this dream, and in the dream, I come up with a great idea for a new TV show. I mean, a hit TV show.
The show really, for me as a young adult, really caught my imagination.
That night was the beginning. We would see more of each other, then all of each other. But this is television, so we won't get into that.
The minute you hear dun dun dun, you know, you went, there's Moonlight.
Moonlighting was born at a kind of interesting time because it was actually, you know, the Reagan years, but it was something that was experimental, and it, you know, for something like that to come out of such a conservative time is kind of interesting.
This is our slow time.
Mornings?
Well,
Monday?
kind of.
Spring?
The 80s.
We were one manifestation of the 80s. I mean, when you think of the major clothing shows like Dynasty and Miami Vice and my show, they were very much of the period, but they were very different.
Where did you get all this junk?
Oh, where else? The mall.
The mall?
The mall. The mall has it all.
Moonlighting is that sort of classic comedy where there are references to what's going on during the 80s, but you can watch it 20 years later, and I'm sure 40 and 60 years later, and still appreciate just how funny this show was.
Ha!
Huh?
Ha ha!
Uh-huh.
With Moonlighting, the show at the time was groundbreaking. It really was. It was a water cooler show. It was on the cover of Newsweek. It was on the cover of every magazine at the time. I mean, it was just like no one had seen a relationship like this before, and that's why they tuned in.
Really looking forward to working with you, kid.
At the time, there was this sort of, it sounds ridiculous now, detectives, and particularly television detectives, were held in a kind of regard that made no sense given the place they held in the real world. First of all, they were ubiquitous. They were everywhere. They were on every network all the time. Having said that, in my life, I've never passed a detective agency. I mean, I've never been tooling down the street and there's a detective. They're nowhere. But on television, they were everywhere.
It was something different, even though there were a lot of detective shows out at that time. There was Remington Steele and Scarecrow Mrs. King. I mean, there was just so many. I don't think anybody really wanted another one.
What? A television show? About me? Well, I don't know. I think people have had it with detective shows.
They called it the madcap of Moonlighting at the time. It was a combination of screwball and romance. It was never a detective show, even though at the time there was tons of detective shows on the air. But this one just had such a different twist to it. And it really wasn't a detective show, it was a relationship show, and it was a battle of the sexes also.
I mean, Wednesday morning, that's all you talked about. That's all you heard was, wow, did you watch Moonlighting last night? And let's have a Moonlighting party. And I mean, people were into it.
It was interesting as viewers, I think people would talk about the next day of what happened, and it would always be interesting because the men would see it from David's view and the women would see it from Maddie's view.
Men's room.
I am not a sexist.
Not only are you a sexist, but you are the sexiest sexist it has ever been my good fortune to satirize.
Satirize?
Satirize, scrutinize, fantasize, etc., etc., etc.
But Moonlighting brought something to the plate that all the other detective shows that were on there, they just didn't. It was that chemistry. They drew you in, whether it was comedy or drama. It was the best. And everybody's like, okay, we've got to be there to watch Moonlighting. And then that was the talk.
It was an extraordinary feeling to have that success, and all the rules that we broke with restraint. And I think that's one of the, breaking the fourth wall. We didn't do it every episode. We found that Maddie really can't do it. I think I did it in one episode, didn't really work. It was something that David did. David, do you think he's planning on marrying them both?
That would make him the biggest bigamist in bigamy history. Try saying that fast 3 times.
Television began to change with Moonlighting, and I think that one of the nice things about it is that it was the first show that they just didn't have straight close-ups where people would, say their line and then pause for a close-up and a reaction. It was boom, boom, boom. I mean, we just threw out the dialogue really fast.
Any idea what he's looking for?
A clue.
Okay, give me one.
Give me one what?
Give me a clue what he's looking for.
A clue.
I'm waiting.
For what?
To find out what the man is looking for.
The man is looking for a clue. A clue, a clue, a clue.
Gesundheit.
We did Moonlighting. It premiered. The headline in the LA Times, the headline in the calendar section was Beauty and the Beast. Just a horrible review. Yeah. 3 weeks later, Howard Rosenberg, who wrote that review, wrote another review, and it said, okay, I didn't get it, and sort of retracted everything he said. Moonlighting was, I think, 64th in the ratings after its 5th week on television. And I remember getting a call from a guy at ABC saying, you know, I really like the show, but I don't think it's ever going to do any better than it's doing. And I said, and this is the truth, yeah, I think you're right. I genuinely felt that we were probably making a niche television show. So if we had done the 6 and everybody had walked away, at that moment, that didn't seem like such a terrible thing. It was over the summer, over that first summer, word started to get out, and people started to watch them a second time and a third time, and then that's really when it blossomed.
It was smart, it was sassy, it was full of great dialogue. This was a show that almost every critic that I knew admired right off the bat.
First of all, the reviews were they were the best reviews I have ever gotten in my career. And we were compared to Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, and I've been waiting for this part for my whole life, and it was the part of a lifetime. I loved it because I got to do funny things, send my image up, do shtick, and be this invulnerable woman who's really vulnerable.
The show was very much about the business of being a man, the business of being a woman. That's what it was about. And there was nothing like that on television. So I knew if I could just get like a real man, a real guy, and get a real girl, and I could write for them, that was going to be combustible.
Miss Hayes, Miss Harrison, there's a man here to see you.
Not now, we're fighting.
Yes, there's... It being uncomfortable started with it being such a hit and everybody having to adjust to new roles in their lives and new roles in the business. You know, by it being a hit show, the pressure on Bruce and Sybil was enormous. I mean, ABC pretty much saw it as a two-person show and a two-person star vehicle in that sense. And just in terms of the workload, I mean, the pressure was enormous on both of them. You know, they were in just about every frame, and it was an hour-long show, so it was a very difficult set. And to me, what really matters is how fortunate we are to have a wonderful project and a wonderful thing to work on. People's misery in the midst of that is pretty befuddling to me.
Well, it seems like sometimes the very best work comes out of the most troubled shows, and certainly Moonlighting is a classic example of that. The conflicts that were reported to have occurred on set, the last-minute changes, the Sybil Shepherd's problems with the way her character was being portrayed, all of it sort of created a kind of a cauldron of creativity.
I think you at least owe her the courtesy of listening to her story. What are you doing?
I'm doing what I should have done all along. What I wanted to do originally. What I should have done last night. Stop that, David! Actually, Bruce and I fought before every scene that we had to fight in. And it took me 2 years to realize that. And I went to him, I said, do you realize we fight before every fight scene? He said, you're right. But it didn't change. We still fought. It was just like getting the blood going, you know, getting it up for the scene. And I think also it was a unique time for two actors, and of course the rest of the cast was wonderful too, but for Bruce and I both, we were just made for each other.
He really went at Sybil on the set to gear her up. You know, he'd come at her from one angle and hit her with a different tactic, and he'd do stuff off camera to energize her, charge her, just really inventive creatively, really great imagination.
The character, David Addison, was always the one that was softer, trying to get Maddie to see, you know, this was going on in the world.
Bruce was kind of Humphrey Bogart of TV. He was played totally against the expected types. You know, he wasn't the Rockford Files kind of guy. And I think that's what made it work.
Hell of an entrance, huh?
He was a guy's guy because he didn't have to be this big macho dude. And, you know, he wasn't the perfect body. He wasn't the, you know, most beautiful guy in the world. But there was something women found extremely attractive and sexy about him because he just had an attitude, you know, about life. And I think that made it really fun.
I'm just surprised you didn't try to take me to your place.
I think I'm insulted. Would you have gone for it? Of course you would have.
That was the big thing people watched for in the early seasons, is there was always the attraction between the two of them, and you wanted to see how far they would push it with every episode. And every episode they inched it along just a little bit further, and then it was as if they would back it away and they'd start over again, and neither one would admit that they'd even gone that far.
Later on, when they had their first kiss, and I mean, woo! I mean, that just, things went crazy when that happened. It was like there was a revolt. You know, people were going crazy over it. So, you know, those were the times when you realized that even though it was just television, you were doing something that people really got into, and it impacted them enough where they would write and call, and we were always getting feedback. That was kind of fun.
Every now and then you are lucky enough to have an experience where sort of all elements come together, and I hate to use the cliche lightning in a bottle, but that was pretty much it. They were always, you know, very good, very funny, very right on what they should be, and always a pleasant surprise.
Who says you can't bring the countries of the world together? Settle their differences in a civilized and orderly